It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. She's a regular here on WMAL's Larry O'Connor Show, and it's my pleasure to welcome Ann Coulter, columnist and New York Times bestselling author of Resistance is Futile, How the Trump-Hating Left Lost Its Collective Mind. Ann, thanks for joining us today.
Great to talk to you, Stacey. How are you?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. I actually was really excited to see that the nationwide injunction that was leveled against the Trump administration on using military funds to build just a teensy little portion of the border wall was lifted. What's your take on what they're going to do now that they at least have that $3.5 billion?
Well, we'll see. I've been hearing it's coming for more than 3 years now, and it turns out I checked to send my dyspeptic tweet today. I'm back to my border wall update, and turns out the total new wall built by the administration is at most 2.5 miles, which represents less than 0.2% of where we need a border wall. Once they have a wall in, and somebody can give me the longitude and latitude of it, I'll throw a big party there and celebrate. But until then, it's all just, it's coming.
And I would join you there for that party. I'm kind of amazed at how effective the resistance by certain members of Congress working in cohort with their assets and allies in the judiciary, how successful they've been in thwarting the president's aim on putting up border wall.
Well, it's true, but I mean, that's why I sent another dyspeptic tweet last night, listening to Donald Trump talk about read Article 2, read Article 2. No, he understands the powers of the presidency when he's doing something Sheldon Adelson wants done, killing a general in Iran. But when what his 63 million voters voted for, and he promised them at every single rally that he would build a wall, it just seems to evaporate from his head. Article 2. I mean, he's had the powers. I've said this from the beginning. I've said it during the transition. He didn't need Congress. In fact, I wrote in the book, In Trump We Trust, a magnificent little book that I think Trump should read. Among the wonderful things about his campaign, as opposed to his presidency, is that of all of his major promises, only one of them required any input from Congress, and that was repealing and replacing Obamacare. Okay, so you can blame Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell for that. Everything else, the taxing remittances that go back to, all nations, but particularly to Mexico, that's how Mexico pays for the wall. 20 to 30 billion is sent by immigrants from Mexico, both legal and mostly illegal, back to Chiapas, back to the grandmothers. Every year, if we put a small tax on those remittances, something Chris Kobach has been recommending forever, the proceeds from that tax would more than pay for the wall. It's very easy to do. A lot of regulations were put in place, or laws were put in place, allowing the Treasury Department, Treasury Secretary by himself, to make rules like this, governing banks and financial transactions. The president, as the president of the United States, has full authority to tax remittances. He's had that authority for 3 years. He's done nothing. As I wrote, and anyone can look up on his own, in Adios America, the anchor baby policy was invented. It was never deliberated and passed as a law, that if you run across the border 8 months pregnant, drop a baby, that baby is a U.S. citizen. No Supreme Court has said, yep, that's the law. That's what the Constitution commands. Congress, there's no federal law stating that is what the policy is. It was dicta in a footnote from a 1982 opinion written by Justice Brennan, and everyone just acts like that's the law. It's a perfect opportunity for an executive order. I mean, I prefer Congress to pass a law because that makes it permanent, saying that if an illegal drops a baby on U.S. soil, that doesn't make the baby a citizen. But that is something that could be corrected. It could have been corrected from day one by Trump merely putting his signature on an executive order. So you can't blame Congress for this stuff. Look, the Democrats are a disaster. I'm certainly not suggesting that they'd be better. They'd be quite a bit worse. But I think I think there's nothing more important to ensuring Donald Trump's reelection than the base putting pressure on him to keep his promises. The economy is good now. That can change. Look at the first President Bush. And remember, he only won by 80,000 votes across 4 states. He needs to keep his promises. If he loses a small amount of his base without picking up new voters, actually, he's got to not only keep his base, he has to pick up voters, because every day thousands of traditional Americans die off and thousands of immigrants become citizens and start block voting for the Democrats. So he's already starting with a deficit. I think other people have done this. I forget what the number is, but you know what I'm saying. The number of electoral votes Democrats start with election day, before the first vote has been cast. They get all the electoral votes from California, Illinois, New York. Thanks to immigration, you can now throw in Nevada, New Mexico, Virginia, perhaps Georgia, perhaps Texas and Florida. When we lose those two, good night, America.
Yeah, we don't really have any place else to run to either. That's what I keep pointing out to people who seem a bit lethargic. We actually have to fix things here, because there's no other country where we can say, what would be a good alternative to America? There isn't one. There isn't one on the planet. So I actually think one of the most important things he could do is to kind of look at the timeline of what happened with DACA, how we're now having to have the Supreme Court decide whether or not a regular run-of-the-mill executive order can be undone, which every other president before this one has done routinely. Now we need a Supreme Court decision on that. If that works for DACA, then the president could easily write an executive order saying that birthright citizenship is not a thing, and the next president would have to take it up to the Supreme Court to get it undone, which would save us untold tens of millions of illegal aliens coming here and having anchor babies and also coming here and getting citizenship. I'm absolutely positive that if it works for him, Obama, then it could work for President Trump, because that's what President Obama did. He just signed a stupid executive order legalizing a bunch of people. It should never have been allowed to stand, yet here we are.
Yes, their judges are lawless and ours are not, which does present a problem. But I think after a couple of years of this, it's getting to the point that any sane, rational president and his supporters would say, no, I'm sorry, he's the president. He's been the exact opposite of an authoritarian. When judges who are authoritarians, little puny district court judges, seem to think they're the commanders in chief, and overturn legitimate executive function actions, and we have to wait 2 years for the Supreme Court to hear the case and uphold it, as with, for example, the Muslim ban, as with funding for a wall to protect American citizens. Of course, the executive has the authority to do that. But when you get these ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center judges deciding they're czars of the universe, I think it's well past time for the president to say thanks for your opinion, but I'm the president. You are 1/1000th of one branch of government that is my co-equal. Because if that's what's holding him up, and it obviously isn't in the case of anchor babies and remittances and many other things, then he's got to stop being such a wimp about this.
You know what? We could talk for many, many, many more minutes, Ann Coulter. You know how much I love you and love getting your everything. I will tweet out the story. You have one up on your site, anncoulter.com. CNN and Fox News report on the rise of Hitler. It's fantastic. I already read it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Good to talk to you. Bye-bye, Stacey.
Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.